Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June 10th, 2024 regular council meeting. The recommendation is that we are called to order at 6:01 p.m. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And the recommendation is that a closed meeting of council be held on June 10th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at the Wilmot Administrative Complex in accordance with Section 239(2)H of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following: confidential information supplied in confidence from the Province of Ontario. Section 239(2)H, information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board by Canada, a province or territory, or a Crown agency of any item. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and we will reconvene at roughly 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. We will jump right into reconvening into open session at 7:18 p.m. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So thank you to all of those joining. It's nice to see a full gallery. I will read our territorial land acknowledgement. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee and Mississauga peoples. We want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. I also want to add, earlier, I guess it was last week, our ecumenical working group had a blanket ceremony event at the local New Hamburg Community Center, and it was part of Indigenous Month for June, and it was a really wonderful, it was a very enlightening experience to go through, and it really made me resonate more with the land use and considering how we continue to impact our land as all of us that live and work here today. So I just wanted to thank the Ecumenical Working Group for setting up that blanket exercise and for having people out to that. In addition to the agenda, we do have some new items added today. 10.9, we have delegations regarding item 15.3. We have Rory Farnan, Kevin Thomason, and Stuart Snyder joining us. And as well as we have added item 11.1, which is a correspondence from Enbridge Gas, which has been circulated to all of council as well. May I have a mover for the agenda as presented for June 10th to be adopted? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. For any discussion on the community grants, I'm still the Prevention Services Coordinator for the Firebirds, and so I declare my pecuniary interest with the Firebirds.
Thank you very much, Councillor. There won't actually be discussion this evening, so I think you'll be good. It's just a photo op and an opportunity for them to pick up their checks this evening. But thank you for providing that. As for minutes of the previous meeting, we have the minutes from May 27th regular council meeting. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And we do, like I said, have some presentations this evening. So our first one is our community grants presentation. And these are all of our successful organizations that we were able to give funding to, following up from our last meeting when we made that decision. So I do believe that in person we have multiple representatives from those groups. I will quickly read out the organizations, and then I will invite the representatives to come up here for a photo op. After which point, when we do a group photo, you can then go over to Director Catania. He will have your checks that you actually get to take home from council tonight for your organization. So just before I announce everyone's organization on a whole, thank you to all of you for all the great work that you do in our community. It's really important, and we're very happy as council to be able to help support the work that you guys are able to do. So we will have the Wilmot Horticultural Society who's joining us, the Wilmot Agricultural Society, Interfaith Community Counseling Center, Wilmot Family Resource Center, Community Care Concepts, the School Safety Patrollers, Wilmot Senior Woodworking and Craft Club, New Hamburg Firebirds, the Wilmot Terry Fox Run, Nith Valley Eco Boosters, New Hamburg Art Tour, New Hamburg Concert Band, Love Your Neighborhood Community, Optimist Club of Mannheim, and the Wilmot Girls Hockey Association. There are all people for. I also want to note that Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School, New Dundee Artisan Festival, and New Hamburg Hockey Association also received funding, but I don't believe that we have people in person. So if I could invite all of the representatives from those organizations up for a photo op, please, and councillors, if you want to come up and join the photo as well, we're just going to do it in front of the bench here.
Yes.
This way we get some seat too. You might have to squish people in it as well. We get you to squeeze in just a little bit. Get really friendly. Thank you. Yeah, that's really nice. What you? Everybody do a thumbs up for us? Thank you. Fantastic. Beauty. I'm going to take one more. Thank you, there. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the rest of today is just out there. Oh, before we go, we really like to be able to use these in social media, that kind of thing. So if you don't mind filling out a
Yeah, I have a bit of a time. I guess.
I'll just give you all a moment to get settled, and a reminder, of course, we understand if you do need to leave after that presentation, but we have a great agenda and a few more presentations, so you're of course more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But we'll give about 2 minutes for everyone to get settled. All right, I think that everyone's sorted, so we will jump into our next presentation of the evening, and that is Sustainable Waterloo Region, the 2023 update of the community. So I'll invite up Tova Davidson. Thank you for joining us, Tova. She is the Executive Director of Sustainable Waterloo Region, and you are here to present the 2023 update. You will have 10 minutes, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mayor Salonen. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see all of you today. And I love this presentation that I get to do each year, come and speak to councils and just give you some updates on the work that SWR has done in this community and beyond in the year previous. So we're talking about 2023, but I'm going to do something I don't normally do and talk a little bit about what we're working on in 2024. Next slide, please. I really love this slide. We do it every year, and I think if you pay attention to nothing else that I present today, this would be the one I would ask you to take particular attention to. It's a synopsis of some of the things that we've accomplished in the past year, and I'll highlight just a few of them. We've had about 18,000 supporting hours through volunteers. People think SWR is a massive organization. In fact, we're 8 people. We're not that big, but we've got a really strong contingent of volunteers who help us. We have more than 700 people come to our events over the course of a year. We've planted a bunch of trees. I'll talk to you about those. And about 40,000 employees are supported by organizations that we support. So if you don't know SWR, we are a social enterprise nonprofit, and we support organizations and communities in the movement towards a more prosperous, more equitable, better low-carbon future. Next slide, please. The TravelWise program is a program that was executed in partnership with the region of Waterloo, and we were proud to work on that program for 12 years, the only executor of the program in its history. We even kept it viable through the pandemic, and it was all about getting employees to choose other ways to get to work because they're happier and healthier, save money, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the program. At the end of 2023, the program was well established enough that the region deemed it was now good enough to bring in-house, and so we're really happy about the success of that program and encourage organizations to consider it. Next slide. Our microforest program is one that lots of people pay big attention to, and it was just this harebrained scheme in 2021. We thought, what would happen if we decided to plant some trees on undevelopable land? And after that first year, we planted 2 forests, each of them about 100 trees, each on the size of a residential building lot, and the program has grown and grown. And over 3 years, we've now planted 20 forests. About 1,800 trees have been planted in 5 municipalities across the region. I actually was speaking to the folks at Innova, and they're like, well, there's money that goes to the municipalities. You could do even more. I'm like, fantastic. Yes, we would love to do even more. And they're often put in schoolyards, in parks, in little corners of corporate spaces, all to bring the benefits of what trees do for us. Next slide, please. One of the ones we're particularly proud of is a Spirit Garden for Everyone, which was done in partnership with Anishinaabe Outreach. And that one was in Woolwich Township. And it was actually our very first food forest. So we were planting apple trees, peach trees, raspberry bushes, blueberry bushes, that sort of thing, as well as cedars, which is a traditional medicine. With the idea that not only are we renaturalizing spaces and taking the time to plant and care for the land, but also that we will be feeding people for years to come, and that this organization, Anishinaabe Outreach, will harvest those trees and be able to feed their community. Next slide. We also planted in 5 schools with the public school board, and I really love this slide. I've kept it in every single time because the person on the right is one of my close friends, and her name is Julia. And she came out last April, so just over a year ago, and it was a pouring rain day, as you can see, but she planted her very first tree. And providing that opportunity for people to actually connect back to the earth is a really interesting part of this program. It allows you to start to reconnect, to think about the role that you play. And I love that quote that says, "A society grows great when it plants trees under which the people planting it will never sit." So I really love this program, and I'm really grateful for the support. Next slide. The program is done entirely by corporate sponsors. SWR is a fully self-sustained social enterprise. We have no core funding, and this program is all on the wishes and support of organizations across the region. Next slide. Our Climate Action Program, I'm going to talk very quickly about this one because Kira, the Climate Action Plan Manager, is here with an update as well. Next slide, please. But for those who don't know, Climate Action is a partnership between SWR and Reap Green Solutions. They are our sister organization who works in the area of residential, where we work with corporate, and all 8 municipalities in this region, including this one. And we're really happy to be working together on what is the greenhouse gas footprint of our community and what is the plan to move forward with it. Next slide. The one thing I will draw some attention to is the Transform WR Progress Dashboard. So Transform WR is the local strategy for all of the things we need to do to try to reach our targets. And we often get questions about, how are we doing, what's moving forward? And so this progress dashboard was launched last year, where anybody in the community can go online to the dashboard, take a look at what are any of the 80 or so actions that are listed in the Transform WR strategy, who are the owners of those actions, what is the progress towards them, and to be able to measure on an ongoing basis. And there was an article in the Record recently that talked about the communities, some research that had been done about communities across Canada and who's making progress on climate change. And Waterloo Region was held out as an exceptional example, one of only 4 that had reported measured progress being made. And it was partly because of this, but they attribute it to the collaborative way that we actually execute sustainability and climate change work in Waterloo Region. Next slide. That program has engaged lots and lots of people. I know some of them were in the townships last year. More than 400 community members are engaged, because we know that it's really important for everyone to understand that climate work is everybody's work and that it is a better future for everybody if we are looking to these solutions. So we're really proud of being out in the community sharing those messages. Next slide. The Impact Network is the program most people think of when they say they're a member of SWR. They usually mean the Impact Network. This is the program where we work with individual organizations, including the Corporation of the Township of Wilmot, as members, to help you figure out what your own operational emissions are. How do you reduce them? How do you save money by reducing them? How do you reduce your risk exposure through reduction of your climate impacts? How do you have good reporting? How do you attract better employees? All of those great things. There's lots and lots of benefits as to why to do that. This program, over the 2023 year, committed to reducing about 75,000 tons of GHGs, but all of the members with targets actually exceeded those targets and reduced almost 95,000 tons of GHGs. That's 7,500 tons more than in 2022. And one of the pieces of this program that I've been encouraging people to consider, and I would love for the staff in Wilmot to think about this, is to be part of the Carbon Cleanse. This is an inter-member competition for engagement, and it's all fun. So it's things like, hey, who can upcycle the most interesting thing? And people used basketballs to make planters for their plants, and they took a skid and they made a dining room table and all of these fun things, or staff lunches together, etc. All of that to the purpose of getting people to feel like they belong as part of sustainability, and it's a deeply embodied part of their organization. The Evolve One building is a building that SWR was the visionary behind, and we helped to drive it forward. It is developed and owned by the Core Group, and it is certified by the Canadian Green Building Council as the very first net positive multi-tenant office building in Canada. It was done entirely within the developer's approved budget. The cost was only between 5% and 8% more expensive than a standard Class A building. So when people say it's a lot more expensive to build green, it's not, and this building proves it. One of the not so happy stories from the past year, however, is that it was the first time the Evolve One building was not net positive energy. We actually publicly report how we're doing, not just how it was designed. And when they did the analysis as to why, unfortunately, it was the wildfires that happened that last year. Had a lot of particulate matter in the air, and the sun was not able to shine as brightly, and the solar panels were hindered from it, showing that climate challenges that we're facing can be actually a negatively reinforcing cycle or a positively reinforcing one. Couple of things we're doing in 2024. I don't usually give these updates in this, but I think it's kind of some interesting stuff we're working on. One is that we formed a partnership with Explore Waterloo Region, our local tourism, sporting, and corporate events organization, and we are working in partnership with them through our Impact Network program to be able to measure and figure out the footprint of events that come here, whether they're sporting events, corporate events, conferences, that sort of thing. Partly because there's a huge demand in that sector for that kind of thing to be in RFP responses, and it allows Waterloo Region to stand out from other communities that are looking to attract these events. Another is a training program that we helped to design with Uvaro, who's a local startup here, to educate people to be able to work in sales, project management, etc., in the clean tech sector. Sustainability has been in the news an awful lot lately. If any of you are reading the Record on a regular basis, you'll see that it's mentioned a lot. And one of the main headlines we've seen by Catherine Thompson is the fact that we are past the point of sounding the alarm. Active, ambitious action needs to be taken now. Next slide, please. And what we're finding is that when we look at the movement towards a sustainable future, it's a marathon. This is a long process. And it's a tough time for everybody, but we need to be planting the seeds and working together through engagement, grassroots action, community involvement, and collaborative work. I encourage any of you watching here in the audience, listening online, to consider too that as it's an economic challenge for most people this time of year, for the nonprofit sector, that's even more the case. And so for any organization that you believe strongly in, I encourage you to please help them, support them with your time or treasure. Next slide. Thank you for your time.
That's great, and you had about 40 seconds left, so thank you very much, Tova. Councillors, any questions for Tova at this time? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, thank you for coming to present to us. I really appreciated your presentation, and I think you're involved in the next presentation as well. So both of them, I appreciate that. I'm curious, and maybe this is also for the next presentation, I'm curious if you have any recommendations. I know personally I can't speak for all of council, nor can I speak totally for the township, but I'm interested and I'd be willing to put things forward if you have suggestions for us of what we could be doing. I know I've talked to Director Okrafka already about planning, what can we do to promote building, and so the Evolve 1 building is a great venture, and I've been to the tour for West 5 down in London, and I know there are initiatives building-wise. So anything we can do, I'm certainly interested in your opinion and would be happy to talk with you about that.
Amazing. I would love to have a conversation one-on-one, and one of the first things I would say actually is that data needs to be the deciding factor and the driver behind all of this, and that through your membership, the township's membership with the Impact Network, we actually provide you with the tool to measure your own operating emissions. Where does it come from? How does it need to be improved? Where can you save money by doing it? All of those good things. And I think that data-driven piece is critical. The other thing is to have a good plan to look at what are the co-benefits, the ways to solve, to move forward towards it. I know there's a bunch of things in the community in the Transform WR strategy. That's a big piece as well. And one last thought, most people assume as a person that works in the environmental sector that the number one thing I'm going to say is, let's put up solar panels. Everyone thinks that's the first thing I'm going to say. In fact, my number one thing I think you should do is improve your windows and insulate your buildings. That is a far bigger bang for your buck. You're going to save a lot more money, and it's a really practical thing, and then you don't have to put in bigger heating systems, et cetera, because the buildings are efficient. Sustainability is efficiency.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, on the microforest project, I mean, looking at it, did some quick math, 20 forests, you got 1,800 trees, give or take, so just about 90 or so trees per forest. What does something like that cost? I mean, you have some good funding sources. I'm curious if it's possible to expand on that project.
Thank you for the question. The program, it costs us about $6,000 a forest to have them planted, but the trees aren't the little trees, they're the bigger trees like this. They're all native species trees, and then there's a lot of sort of back work that's done to do soil testing, planting, all that kind of thing. And when we do them, we often are working in partnership with organizations, so they don't give us the land, of course, but there's all of those pieces to do as well. We would love to support more and more forests. Math's not my strong suit, but we're on deck to do 15 forests this year. If we do 15 again next year, we will have planted 50 forests in 4 years. I would love to be able to say, can we go even bigger? I'm always thinking there's more we could do, but I think it's a great idea.
Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, I guess terminology, forest, woodlot, bush, I mean, having 50 acres of woodlot, I'm kind of looking at these as micro plantations as compared to anything that is significant. And I think of the partnership with our farming community that has the preponderance of woodlots throughout this township and the region. Somehow the idea of sustainable harvest of those and spurring growth by removing trees selectively and allowing the canopy to increase and take over that is a crucial thing that we should be celebrating and somehow getting that as some type of measurement. So I just throw it out there as something that I think somehow we're missing the opportunity, and I think managed woodlots is something that certainly is being I realize it's not quite in your wheelhouse.
Not, no.
But I realize every little bit helps, so.
Absolutely, and it's not in my wheelhouse, so I don't have expertise. Would hate to pretend that I do. The one thing I would say is that they are microforests, and they are intended to help usually in more urban areas or to support in areas where there's infrastructure. So sometimes we've seen them on the edges of parking lots or the edges of roads to slow down wind, to slow down snow being blown across. Some parking lots they put them so that they don't get water running down as it melts because it slows down the water, ice, that sort of thing. So sometimes it's seen as green infrastructure. And then in some cases in schoolyards, now in the township, the schoolyards would have more green space around them. But in some schoolyards, especially in really urban areas, there's very little shade provided to children, and the heat island effect can be really intense. So there's all of these benefits, and absolutely that doesn't downplay at all of the existing trees. I love them all. I'll go out and hug them with you if you would like, and I think it's great to have lots and lots of forestry around us when I bring it into all of the areas where we can in the region.
Any other questions for Tova at this point, councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Tova. Now I believe that you are also doing your second presentation along with Kira, who is the manager of Climate Action at Action Waterloo. The manager of Climate Action Waterloo Region. I'm sorry, I don't know why I can't speak tonight. And I believe that you are presenting us with the greenhouse gas inventory report.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And again, you will have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So my name is Kira, the plan manager for the Climate Action WR program, presenting with Tova, the executive director of Sustainable Waterloo Region, and on behalf of Patrick Gilbride, the executive director of REAP Green Solutions as well. We're here to present the results of our community-wide greenhouse gas inventory for the year 2022. Can I get the next slide, please? I won't focus on this slide too much since Tova already introduced that we're co-led by REAP Green Solutions and Sustainable Waterloo Region, working collaboratively with all 8 municipalities. At a high level, we coordinate the activities in our community climate action plans, measure and monitor progress towards our emissions reduction, and engage the community more broadly in local climate action initiatives. Can I get the next slide, please? So as a community, we committed to reducing emissions 50% by the year 2030. We're here to provide another update towards this 2030 target. Understanding progress on our emissions reductions can inform decision-making and hold us all accountable to take ambitious action. Just a click forward. Okay. In 2022, our community emissions were 12% less than the 2010 baseline. This is only slightly higher than the 15% in our 2020 inventory and was as to be expected from reduced travel during the COVID-19 pandemic. While 12% does show great progress from our previous 6% target, I'd like to stress that we are not on track to meeting this 50 by 30 target. Why is this target so important? We are in a crucial window to make changes in this decade as part of global efforts to keep warming limited to 1.5 degrees. It's also a necessary milestone to our long-term target of 80% by the year 2050. Next slide, please. So looking at what sectors our emissions come from or that we measure, we can see that transportation emissions still account for almost half of our community-wide emissions, followed closely by emissions from buildings at 45%. Next slide. So if we look at our emissions in more detail over time, we see the dip in 2020 and the slight increase to 2022. The transportation section, the green section, is further broken down to highlight the emissions by vehicle type. We see passenger vehicles, including cars, light-duty trucks, and SUVs, account for nearly 65% of our transportation emissions, and commercial non-passenger vehicles and buses accounting for the other 35%. This is an important indicator of the need to support residents' interest in transitioning to zero emissions vehicles and increased use of public and active transportation. Next slide, please. If we look more closely at the transportation emissions data, we do see some improvements due to lesser average distance traveled, resulting in slightly improved emissions for transportation. However, the trend of purchasing larger vehicles is limiting this progress with lesser fuel efficiency in light-duty trucks and SUVs than cars. Next slide. So for building emissions in orange, industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings account for 60% of the emissions in this category, and residential, the other 40. If we go to the next slide. This shows the changes in emissions from each energy source from our baseline year to 2022. So we see that natural gas accounts for the most significant portion of emissions from ICI and residential buildings. Electricity from buildings is the orange ribbon. I'd like to highlight the effects of the phase out of coal between 2010 and 2015 in reducing emissions quite significantly despite increasing demand. So then gasoline and diesel are the next highest emitting sources, most of which is from the transportation category, of course. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, Transform WR is our community climate action plan that outlines 78 actions in more detail for Waterloo Region's transition to an equitable, prosperous, and resilient low-carbon community. This strategy is supportive of us reaching our 50 by 30 and 80 by 50 emissions targets. Next slide, please. So how can we get back on track? Firstly, reducing emissions requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. Solutions are the responsibility of everybody, every elected official, every municipality, and every organization. We also need to engage residents to participate in climate solutions. From this inventory, it's clear that we need supportive policies, community programs, and incentives, as well as strong advocacy to upper levels of government to drive less enabled by robust public transit, and expansion of safe, active transportation in central areas and in newly developed communities. And this investment must be paired with the increased adoption of zero-emissions vehicles for personal and fleet vehicles, as well as equipment. Next slide, please. Click through it a couple times, sorry. Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Again, sorry. Okay, so to support accelerated emissions reductions in buildings, we need supportive policies, community programs, and incentives, as well as strong advocacy to upper levels of government to use less energy by making improvements to building envelopes and using energy more efficiently. This could be through, for example, support of programs such as Retrofit WR at the regional level and exploring similar initiatives that enable commercial buildings and businesses to decarbonize, as well as the adoption of ambitious high-performance building standards, and continued exploration of low-carbon thermal energy projects as well. So thank you for your time and attention today to learn and understand our progress towards our community-wide emissions reductions and the need for accelerated action to get on track to meeting our long-term emissions reduction targets.
Thank you very much, Kira. Councillors, questions at this time? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, thank you again for this presentation. I appreciate both of you coming and presenting to us. Again, reiterating, I'm personally interested in any suggestions you have for us. I know I've discussed with Director Mullenhouse the policy on idling of engines in terms of our vehicles that the township has, and I understood from you, Director Mullenhouse, correct me if I'm wrong, that we do have a policy on anti-idling and staff are asked to shut the engines off. So I'm hoping and trusting that people are following our policy. I was just curious in terms of citizens or residents in the township, is that something that we should keep promoting? Is idling a significant issue? I also think about Route 77. We've had some discussion about weekend. I know in the townships transit is a big issue and encouraging public transportation. We've talked, I know with Mayor Salonen, you and I have talked about weekend increasing the route on the weekend, and that's a problem. For people that have employment, there isn't a bus on the weekends or even overnight if people are working at a place like Nithview, for example, and living in Kitchener-Waterloo. So any ideas you have for us, I'm certainly interested, and thank you. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Certainly the advocacy for expanded transit service into the townships is something that is in the action plan of Transform WR. Anti-idling is certainly supportive policies, but I think we do need to be being quite ambitious in what we're thinking about as well. Idling is a waster of our gasoline. but that doesn't necessarily support residents to reduce the emissions. I think, advocating to the upper levels of government for support in retrofitting our homes is that sort of ambition that we need to have as a community to advocate for support there.
Any other questions at this time, councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you again very much for joining us, Kira and Tova, this evening. It was, I know I got to see you recently at Regional Council as well, so it was nice to see you guys twice in a week. All right, and as for delegations, like I said, we have 3 registered delegations this evening who are going to be speaking on matters on the agenda. When I get to those items, I will call up each delegate individually when it's their time to speak. Just quickly running over the rules in order to maintain respectful and orderly environment during the meeting, I request that all delegates follow the guidelines of not interrupting councillor, staff, or other delegates while speaking, refraining from making derogatory remarks about councillors, staff, or others, and do not use hate speech or defamatory comments. You've all been here, I believe, and delegated to us before, so I think everyone knows the rules. But like I said, I will call you up when we get to those points. And then on to correspondence. I did already mention we just have the one correspondence from Enbridge Gas. Did anybody want to pull that? Councillor Martin?
Yes, through you, Mayor Salonen, I would like to. Shall I speak to it now? Or so I just wanted to bring up, highlight this correspondence. I know natural gas is complicated. We just saw the presentation from Climate Action Waterloo Region and the significance of natural gas in terms of greenhouse gases. I know Director Okrafka, you and I have had some conversations about building code, and I realize building code is provincial rather than municipal, but what can we do on a municipal level to promote clean building and considering alternatives to natural gas, and yet recognizing it's right now a more affordable option for people, and I'm not trying to make life more difficult for people, but I just put it out there that I appreciate receiving this letter and at the same time recognize the complications that come in trying to move forward on our goals of the 2030 guidelines.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on the correspondence this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will jump into the consent agenda. If any member of council wants to remove an item from the consent agenda item, please indicate now. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I would move to pull item 12.1 regarding the private water drinking system conversion.
Very good. So we can pull that and you can speak to that now.
Perfect. So speaking on this, I do have a couple questions just for Director Molenhuis. I know that we have taken over control through partnership with the region of the water system in Petersburg. I was pleased to see that we have moved up the timeline in terms of getting water meters installed, and I'm sure a lot of the residents will be quite pleased with that as well. I did have a question for you regarding the billing that's being proposed on the interim. Can you speak to that at all? I know in the public meeting there was some concerns over having equal billing divided amongst households because some households have 6 residents, some have 2, and there was maybe a desire to see the previous administration's billing maintained until the water meters are fully installed. Are you able to elaborate on where we stand on that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. At the project level, there's a few challenges with, converting it to the system that we have with the billing and whatnot. So we did look at the approach of maintaining previous practices until the conversion is in place. But I don't think there's the full detail there yet to go back to, or to go to that, we'll say billing model at this point. We are still reviewing it and we will consider it as we go through the install process. But I would suggest that the goal here is really to get meters installed as soon as possible and quickly, and there is a very short window, I'll say a short project window to do that, and that's really the goal of where we are right now. So we haven't had the full time to review that billing practice, but it is still something we're considering as the project moves forward.
Follow-up question, Councillor?
Through the chair, thank you for that. That's helpful, and obviously there's still a lot of work to be done on the billing side. One other piece I wanted to sort of comment on or ask a question on regarding the report was there was talk about getting the meters installed and then sort of taking a deeper dive and looking at what the infrastructure needs to be for the system. When that infrastructure work takes place, I know there's some questions about if they're going to be digging up and installing new lines. Are we also looking at partnering, or I guess with our own departments about looking at the roads and the storm sewer system at the same time? Is that probably within the same project?
Through you, Mayor. So the initial phase of the project with respect to the public infrastructure is reviewing what needs to be replaced. And that's an engineering report that we are expecting to receive likely in the next couple of weeks. That will serve to be the content, I guess, of the public meeting in the fall that will cover much of what you just mentioned there in terms of what the proposal will be for the project. I'm expecting that we will need to replace water main infrastructure, and I would also expect that we would be looking to do road reconstruction and whatnot in the area as well. However, that will be determined and outlaid at the next public meeting in the fall.
Any other questions on this report, councillors? Okay, seeing none, as there was no direction or change from that, I will ask for a mover and seconder to pass items 12.1 and 12.2, moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to reports, we have 13.1, and that is that report COR-2024-29, tax billing communications, be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman, and I'll now invite our Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Greg Clark, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think 2 council meetings ago, council asked that we report back on our ability to communicate to the public through the tax bills the proportionate share of tax revenue that stays with the township versus that goes to the region and to the various school boards. And we did start on the project and we got a lot of data captured. Unfortunately, my lead in that role has left the township and joined the city of Kitchener, and I'm very excited for her, but it does leave a gap in my team. And so I've provided a report back to council that basically outlines that and outlines some of the next steps that we will take. So as we prepare for the budgets, we'll be reviewing engagement and how we communicate to the public, the impact of tax rate increases as well as rate increases throughout the year. And one thing I did want to sort of highlight to this is the background data that we've got is that we are heavily paper-based, so about 10% of our tax bills go out via e-bills. Our water and wastewater is a little bit better, about 40%, but it is very paper-based, so part of our strategy is going to be encouraging people to move to e-bills, which makes it easier for us to add supplemental conversations to the distributions that go out, as well as directing traffic to the website and different methodologies of connecting with them there. So I don't have specifics, as the report says, about what we're going to do, but we are going to be bringing that back through the budget planning, through the communications that we provide to you about how we're going to engage with the public around the budget, and we'll give you more options about alternatives next year that we can insert, because the other thing is tax bills just went out last week, so those were the final bills for 2024, and our next tax billing is not due till February. So we do have a bit of time to get ahead of this for next year, and we will provide some options, like I say, through the budget about how we can communicate this, not just the physical means of doing it, but different methods and alternatives on how we can present the impacts of taxation and rates to citizens.
Thank you very much, Director. Questions or comments at this time, councillors? Seeing none, like I said, this is receiving for information, so I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. There was no business arising from closed, and we do have 3/4 notices of motion. So we will start with Councillor Dunstall. I will turn it over to you to introduce your notice of motion.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm just going to summarize. This was something that I saw, and it was a resolution put forward by Midland, and it had support from Cambridge, Coburg, North Perth, and some others. And to summarize, the number of charges laid for failure to comply with court orders, primarily failure to comply with terms of a promise to appear, undertaking, recognizance, probation orders, and peace bonds, is on the rise. That concerned me, so I reached out to our contact at the Waterloo Regional Police Services. I was quite concerned to hear that 4,600 individuals are released into our region, into the community, while awaiting resolution or trial from a provincial crown, with around 1,000, and let me repeat that, 1,000 of these cases related to intimate partner violence. And according to the Canadian Police Information Centre, our region has approximately 1,300 individuals with active warrants at any given time. This is such a serious issue, and was pushed by the provinces, the territories, and First Nations, that in December of 2023, changes for the Criminal Code bail rules received royal assent and took effect in January. These changes focus on serious repeat violent offenders and intimate partner violence. And if you want more information, you can go to justice.gc.ca under amendments to strengthen Canada's bail system. So I ask that we approve this motion so that we can show our support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So this is moved by Councillor Dunstall. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martin. Just to confirm, Councillor, so Councillor Dunstall, it is showing our support through sending a letter to the list then of appropriate dignitaries at the federal and provincial level?
Prime Minister, the Premier, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General.
Yep. I more or less wanted to confirm for the people watching and not necessarily seeing the motion before them. Councillor Martin, did you want to speak at all to seconding the motion? Nope. Okay. Any questions or comments at this time, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to item 15.2, and that's Councillor Sadhu, your first notice of motion, and I will turn it over to you to introduce.
Thank you for that. My motion is to have a staff report back for developing an agricultural committee. We all know that our rural township is at the forefront of conversation and how we want to grow as a community, sustainable growth and future development. I heard from many residents who expect the agricultural sector needs and future success to be of top of mind as we as a community plan our future. As a Wilmot councillor, I know that I would like to directly hear more from farmers in our local agricultural sector more often and in a more of an organized way. So my motion is to get a staff report back that illustrates the best practices and the framework around developing an agricultural advisory committee.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. So that's moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to speak to it at all?
Through the chair, just a brief comment. I agree with what Councillor Sadhu is proposing here. I mean, I thought when this was brought up by a private citizen, it was a great idea. It's at least a way for us to engage further with a large portion of our population here. And representing Ward 2, I know that a vast majority of the land and the citizens in my ward are agricultural or farmers. So would like to have certainly a framework built that will allow us to have better and more meaningful engagement with that particular group.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Sadhu. Is this not a planning-related policy? Because I guess I've sat on a bunch of commodity organizations, many for over 30 years. It's difficult to get farmers to populate the existing committees, and most of them are at the regional level. The Federation, I think, the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture plays this role, and we see, I know Mark Reeser represents policy around agriculture planning. He was an expert at the provincial level when he was vice president of the Ontario Federation previously. So I'm kind of wondering that maybe your heart's in the right place, but I think the challenge to get representation to fulfill this role and hear, as Councillor Wilkinson said, from farmers will be difficult. And we may have it populated with special interest groups which have little or no direct relationship to the farming communities. So that would be my concern.
Yeah, and those are fair concerns. I would just say a little bit of cart before the horse. At this stage, I'm just asking for a staff report back to see what kind of best practices there are amongst municipalities and kind of get a framework. I can't speak to what the appetite would be to fill such an advisory committee, but hearing it from our residents and knowing it would be something that would be beneficial in my eyes to get more of an organized advice from our farmers and have a committee that would help us kind of see their point of view moving forward for our decision making.
Okay, any other questions at this time, councillors? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I guess one of the thoughts that I had is that I wondered if this would be useful discussion at the strategic planning process. I'm not sure, CAO Chambers, if this question is a fair question to you to ask about the expectations that we have on staff, but I wonder about that. I know I've heard you say, CAO Chambers, that we have had some staff shortages, and so asking staff to come back with a report. At the same time, thinking we do have a strategic planning process that should hopefully happen very soon. Is this something that would be good to discuss in the strategic planning process, as well as asking staff what about the expectations that we have on staff and what is appropriate at the present time?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Salonen. I think there's two parts to that question. So number one is around the strategic plan and developing priorities for council, which will assist in developing our work plan going forward for staff. You know, this could be a component of something that would be brought forward as a prioritization, but you know, a member of council has requested this and a reporting back, and that's something that I think we can provide for you. I think it does require cross-departmental collaboration. I think there is an element that legislative services would have, and certainly development services in creating this report back. So in terms of our workload and priority, this motion does ask for July 29th, and that is a fairly quick turnaround in light of the fact that we are about to embark on our strategic plan. We do anticipate, and both the CAOs and planning heads are working toward the downloaded planning from the region to the lower tier municipalities, which is going to be a significant body of work over the summer by an anticipated fall deadline. Along with, you know, quite a significant workload within that development services portfolio around our secondary plan as well. So, you know, I know there has been some internal discussion among staff about reporting back, but perhaps we would appreciate a little bit more leeway in the time frame to report back if that suits council.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall, I see you have a question.
Actually, yes, I hope this is the right time to bring this up. I echo the concern of CAO Chambers as well as Councillor Martin And my concern is that you had mentioned with Bill 185, which requires the township to prepare for the delegation of the planning authority, which we all want that. We've been advocating for more autonomy and to have more control over our future, but there's a significant undertaking. We have two critical issues right now. We have the strat plan, and we also have our financial, trying to stabilize and improve our financial standing while minimizing the impact to the taxpayers is going to take some innovative solutions. And I think that's going to require all hands on deck. So what I would ask is that we hold off on our reports back to council till approximately September. That gives our leadership team, which is embarking on 185, the strat plan, the budget, time to get their stuff in order. Ms. Chambers has brought on Director Clark, so now the team is complete, and I think we need to give them an opportunity to get things settled and get things moving in the right direction. So I would ask that any reports be held off till September 30th or September 15th, giving them 3 full months to get these initiatives off the ground.
Councillor Sadhu.
So to CAO Chambers' point, I did meet with Clerk Bunn as he would be, Clerk Bunn and Director Clark as they would be putting this together. I was actually hoping to have a quicker turnaround, but after talking with them, we agreed that end of July would be enough time for them. Talking about the strat plan, and I get staff have a lot on their plate, but I'll be honest, waiting 3 months for any reports? I mean, what are we doing here then? I mean, I understand giving staff enough time, and that's why I did reach out to our staff prior to raising this motion, and we had agreed, and they were okay, and they did provide me some suggestions of pushing it back a little bit, but I don't know, I just can't wrap my head around pausing everything for 3 months while we sit here and wait.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. I don't think we're sitting here and waiting. I just think asking staff that are already overburdened, there is a staff shortage. We want accurate information. We're pulling them away from from 3 items that are so crucial and critical for our township moving forward effectively and efficiently. We need to let them get these things done, and then we can start adding stuff. It's like building a house. You need the foundation before you can start adding floors. We need to give our people time to get these things done.
I will go to Councillor Cressman. I just want to note, I don't want to go varying down the path of criticizing staff and their work, as they do work very hard, and I think we all know and recognize that. I just want us to be cognizant as we continue our discussion. I think points have been made for keeping the date as is or for pushing it back, but if we could just leave that as is and again not be criticizing our staff and the great work that they are already doing. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I perceive that this is very much related to development services and what is going to be required in terms of the decisions there. And I think that's where the interface will occur in policies, planning policies, etc. And so I would like Director Akrafka to have some comments regarding where, I don't think it relates to our treasurer or our clerk as much as it does to development services and policy as it relates to planning policy.
Thrown into the fray. Sorry. In response to your question, through you, Mayor Sallin, and to the rest of council, we are rapidly, as directors of planning across the region, working on the implementation of Bill 185. It takes effect July 1st for 3 regions, and we expect we will be soon behind in terms of the delegation and the proclamation that the region is no longer the planning authority and that we are taking that responsibility. We're following on the work of other regions right now. We met today, we're meeting Thursday. Regular meetings once a week, dividing the 12 priorities that we see of how that transformation of planning is going to occur, and each taking a lead on sections within that, some of us taking more than one lead. So a considerable amount of policy work going in. This speaks somewhat to agricultural policy, and certainly I would see that this would be a committee that would work primarily with planning, although there would be other, operational issues, public works, for example, road maintenance, those sorts of things could tie into a committee like this. It's possible that the work of a committee like this may also tie, though, as CAO Chambers indicated, to things that come out of the strategic plan, like economic development advisory committees. So there is potential that it could be more, it could be less. But certainly from the planning perspective, locally, there are no agricultural advisory committees in Waterloo Region. The region does not have one. It doesn't mean that it can't be something that's created. Typically, they're at an upper tier municipality in Ontario, regions, counties. I believe Township of Tay and Township of Springwater both have one up near Wasaga Beach, but typically not at the lower level. Having said that, a lot of the lower levels in regional politics have not been the planning authorities until now. And so one thing I could suggest, perhaps, not saying, if council's wishes that we reply in July, we can reply in July. But certainly, this is the kind of subject that needs to be discussed regionally by the directors of planning, because it could be that it's more appropriate to have one regional committee of the lower tiers that provides advice to all townships equally in terms of agricultural matters. That's something that could be discussed. If the other municipalities indicate that they don't see an interest there, it doesn't mean that we can't come back as part of our implementation plan for Wilmot and suggest this may be something you consider, because there may be other components that come out of the delegation of planning authority that you want more than one committee, or again, as I indicated, perhaps a combined committee of economic development and agricultural advisory committee, so it speaks to all matters of the economy within Wilmot Township. So those would be my comments. If council wants a report for the 29th, I can certainly do that. If council wants a report for September, it would probably be a more informed report based on where we're heading with planning delegation and the work that will be involved in that.
Thank you. Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, which I sometimes forget, please apologize. Would you see it then appropriate to refer it to the region for a later date for a decision? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through Mayor Sullivan, not to refer it to the region, but to raise it within the conversations with all 4 townships in particular as we look to how we're going to implement the transition to us being the planning authority. My comment relative to the region was the region currently as planning authority does not have an agricultural advisory committee. Historically, going back 30 years, we used to circulate rural applications to the Federation of Agriculture. Mr. Wagner in Breslau was who we circulated to those. And over time, that process stopped because there was simply, the volume was high and the response rate wasn't really there. But certainly, I think you were correct earlier in your comments that certainly Mr. Reeser is very engaged. He's a resource to Wilmot Township, obviously, with his knowledge and breadth of knowledge. He's got a lot of experience with regional planning over the years, providing advice, not in the form of an agricultural advisory committee, but just as someone who's an expert who can provide input. And certainly we would envision that his involvement in terms of policy in particular would be of value. But again, it's just the timing of when you want the report. Into September gives us more time to have a more informed report from the outcomes of the implementation plan, which again will be coming to you, that implementation plan. We could roll it into that implementation plan if you want, but again, happy to crank something out for the end of July if that's council's wish.
Councillor Cressman.
I would propose an amendment to the motion that would be the action to roll it into the current planning that is taking place between the various municipalities with consideration for a September report on Agriculture Advisory and Industry Committee so if the group so sees fit.
So just so that I'm following correctly, it's not a deferral, you're looking to add this as an amendment to the motion so that that work starts and they start doing that now and bring back the report in September, that's correct? Okay, perfect, thank you. Just want to make sure I'm following along here. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Any questions or comments on the amendment? Okay. I do kind of have one question, and that would be to Director Okrafka. In that work, do you see that, because obviously we're going to be coming up on a secondary review in all of this as well, do you see that kind of somehow coordinating into a secondary review, or do you see those as completely separate items?
Based on staff resources and the timing and the expectations regionally on the transfer, the secondary plan will not probably start until such time as the transition of planning authority is completed. That would be our expectation. At the same time as we have significant policy work to do, we have a very active development application going on. 4 plans of subdivision. One will be coming to you at the end of the month for recommendation of draft approval. We have the employment lands agreements as well. So the team of 3 is fairly inundated with a number of policy aspects, strategic plan. We have the high performance development standards spoken to earlier that we're participating in. Again, a number of policy related projects. Again, if council's wishes July, you'll get the report in July. If September works, that would probably give you a more informed report.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that has been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes, so that is now the motion as amended. Any final comments on the motion as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to Councillor Sadhu's second motion for the evening, just procedurally so everybody knows, because we do have 3 delegates for this. You're going to introduce it, we'll get a seconder, and then we will invite up our delegates. After the delegates, we'll have our debate and vote. So Councillor Sadhu.
Thank you. Historically, at previous meetings, there's been a frustration and a tension when community members would like to formally speak to items that are not on the agenda. Something that is not allowed under our current procedural bylaw. I respect Clerk Bunn's job is to advise us on the rules as they currently exist, and the chair is responsible for upholding these rules. I'm asking my colleagues to join me in considering if this motion can help us be responsive to the ask from our community members that they would like to be able to formally address us here at council meetings on issues related to Wilmot Township. I'd really like to hear from staff on best practices at other municipalities and see this as a tangible way to increase our transparency and build trust with those who've elected us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sadhu. So that's moved by you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Would you like to speak to this at all, Councillor? Okay, very good. So that is on the floor, and we will jump into our registered delegations. So our first delegate on the item is Rory Farnan. Rory, I believe you're joining us in person. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rory, for joining us. And you will have 7 minutes to speak.
Good evening. I think it's the first time I've delegated in person since pre-COVID. So it's great to be here in the flesh. I've been watching online, and certainly thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just want to say thanks for the previous motion, Councillor Sadhu and Councillor Wilkinson. With everything that's been going on in the township over the last couple of years, whether it be, gravel pits or urban boundary expansion or the elephant in the room tonight, one thing familiar is that it compromises our agricultural community and our prime farmland. So it's great to see that there's some interest in putting some priority on that sector in this township. I did want to speak to that, but I believe also in the procedural bylaw is a rule that only allows you to speak to one issue per meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
I would need to look to our clerk because I know we've definitely had actually one of the delegates coming up after you who's spoken more than once in one meeting.
No, sorry to the next
okay.
delegator, but that was my understanding. Otherwise, I would have stood for the last issue. But certainly, a clerk had mentioned to me before that the doors to council always remain open. It's supposed to be a symbolic gesture that both council and the chambers are that of the people, and that they should be welcome into the room. But the question, I guess, some of us have is that enough? And so I guess really, in short, I wanted to stand to, again, thanks to Councillor Sadhu for this idea. Generally speaking, our agendas are staff controlled, right, wrong, or indifferent. And of course, realizing that business has to be conducted within the township, and there are only so many meeting times that you have within the year. I think one has to balance the agenda with topics that are top of mind for people in the township that may actually never even be on a council agenda, whether it be something as big as gravel pits or expropriation, or as little as a chihuahua barking in someone's backyard and somebody wanting to come and talk to that. So I certainly support this motion. I think anything that we can do to broaden our engagement in this community is certainly welcome by myself. And as much as we like to rely on different forms of communication, whether it's email or phone, some people even like to call into the local media once in a while to express their opinion, this is the truest form of connecting with our council and our staff. And so this podium must have as many opportunities for those who want to stand in front of it to do so. So thank you for bringing the motion forward, and I look forward to seeing it become something that is maybe, well, I don't know if it's a first. Kevin, I think, mentioned our good neighbors in Wellesley have a similar type of thing, but I think something that's formal like this will come a long way in greater transparency and two-way communication. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for joining
Take
us,
care.
Rory. Any questions or comments of the delegate at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will move along to our next delegate, and that is Kevin Thomason. Thank you very much for joining us, Kevin, and you already know, but you'll have 7 minutes.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Honorable Mayor, councillors, and guests, my name is Kevin Thomason, and I'm a longtime Wilmot resident who has spent too much of the past 29 years trying to persuade Wilmot Township to update its procedural bylaws to be more accommodating to its citizens and be more welcoming to the public. It is fantastic to see this motion from Councillor Sadhu seeking a staff report on changes to the procedural bylaws to increase the opportunities for public to address Wilmot Council. With my environmental and community efforts, I frequently delegate at municipal and regional councils across the province. The differences between communities and councils can be significant, and it is broadly acknowledged that Wilmot Township is one of the most challenging and difficult, unfortunately earning the reputation of being Will Not instead of Wilmot. It can be almost impossible to speak to Wilmot Council on many important issues, particularly if they aren't ever on an agenda. And even when they are on a meeting agenda, it can still be extremely difficult to register, actually be accepted as a delegation, get your audio-visual materials produced, submitted, and then approved as well, and appear as a delegation, all in the limited few days between when an agenda is released and the council meeting is held. Other municipalities are far more flexible, accommodating, and often have more friendly guidelines in place to begin with. Some communities, such as the City of Waterloo, even have community engagement guidelines, a 30-page guidebook for municipal staff on how to engage citizens right from the onset of an idea or process, rather than just commenting on a report after it has already been completed, and that seek to encourage and increase community participation at council meetings rather than discourage it. Citizens, such as Deb Swidjevich and I, have worked extensively with Wilmot staff going back decades, such as Don Middleholtz and Barb McLeod and numerous others, to update troubling Wilmot procedural bylaws, such as rules that required presentations to be submitted for approval days before the staff reports were even released, and citizens to register for meetings before council agendas were even released. How can anyone be expected to comment intelligently on something that they haven't even seen yet, let alone be psychic to predict that something was going to be on a particular week's agenda before it was even released? It was good to see numerous updates and improvements in more recent Wilmot procedural bylaw updates. However, we still didn't get everything that we were seeking, and the fact that we're here again tonight speaking about the public's frustration with Wilmot's procedural bylaws shows there's still work to be done. The fact that I'm addressing you tonight shows that it is possible for public to get on the agenda at Wilmot Township sometimes. However, I was also rejected to speak on another issue tonight. Green Waterloo Region is a grassroots community organization co-founded by myself and several other Wilmot residents, following the Cache development MZO several years ago. This citizen volunteer group has now grown from Wilmot to an organization of highly engaged citizens in 5 different municipalities to promote green development standards across Waterloo Region. It is totally absurd that a community group founded and based in Wilmot Township with the sole focus of reducing greenhouse gas emissions was refused the ability to appear tonight at Wilmot Council to speak to the Climate Action Waterloo Region report about reducing Wilmot greenhouse gases. The public will have trouble trying to understand how, after Wilmot Township has declared a climate emergency, its own grassroots community group focused on greenhouse gas reduction can't even appear before council to speak to a report on greenhouse gas reduction. If we can't even speak to something that is on the agenda and it seems to be the optimal time for us to be addressing council, heaven only knows if we'll ever get before Wilmot Council. This is in sharp contrast to other area municipalities, such as Woolwich Township, where we've appeared before council several times and even did a 1-hour-long special education session with full council and staff, in addition to other extensive staff education sessions on green development standards. While you have seen me at this podium many times on many occasions over the 3 years I've lived in Wilmot, few will believe how many times I've been rejected or had to go to extreme lengths simply to bring information to council. I've had to stand here and humiliatingly beg, plead, and even have council vote on whether they're even willing to hear what I had to present. I've even been turned away by this municipality with life or death information about fire response following a fire in which several of my neighbors died. This is all in such stark contrast to so many other councils across the region and province that not only welcome citizens, but do all they can to encourage public participation in meetings. It has been shameful to sit here in the gallery as the only citizen in the past and be completely ignored the entire evening, and also hear previous Wilmot councils brag about how short council meetings were or how quickly they could be out of here at 8 p.m. or even 7:30 p.m. while citizens couldn't even get on the agenda to speak to an important community issue. It is such a contrast to other communities where I've seen meetings go late into the night as elected officials ensured that everyone who cared enough to attend had a chance to be heard. Hence, why it is so fantastic to see this motion from Councillor Sidhu to increase the opportunities for the public to speak at Wilmot Council meetings on a wide range of issues within the jurisdiction of the township. I also think it is fantastic to see Councillor Sidhu's motion on the concept of an agricultural advisory committee that could play such an important role in our rural township, given agriculture is our #1 employer, economic driver, and industry in our community. In conclusion, I urge you to support Councillor Sidhu's motion for the staff report on ways to increase opportunities for the public to address both councillors and staff, and to be part of the public record at council meetings on any matter of public interest within the jurisdiction of the township. I also urge you to ensure flexibility, be accommodating, and not overly restrictive, including even the interpretation of within the jurisdiction of the township. Since issues such as this Wilmot Farmland Assembly might be a regional endeavor, but it certainly has implications and impacts to township residents, and council and staff need to be aware of and understand. I hope that this is the start of a new era and culture to transform Wilmot and not only allow but encourage citizen participation and engagement at council and in all township endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I do just want to comment on a few of the items.
Sure,
I didn't interrupt you as I was being lenient in my interpretation on derogatory terms towards staff, but I do want to set the record straight in that I know historically those are experiences that you have shared.
Yes.
That is not true of your experience with anyone sitting around this table at this time.
That's correct.
I do want to make that very clear, and that I know you were in fact very involved with our most recent procedural bylaw update, and we really appreciate your input on it. I just want that not to be misconstrued or interpreted negatively, as well as I can't speak to those in the past who have held different positions, but I don't want it to cast a shadow on them either. I think everyone's done the best with what they've had.
And I'll totally agree and concur to that, and hence why I tried to separate both what the community has gone through in the past, as well as this most recent round of procedural bylaws that we worked on and specifically commented on. It's great to see that. Definitely improvement. Still a little ways to go. That's why we're here tonight, but still all very encouraging, and I hope to see this continue.
Yep, and in terms of the second delegation you wanted to do this evening, it was rejected because it was towards a presentation, and because it's community groups who come in, we don't allow potential scrutiny or comment because we can't. It's not a report coming from staff, so that is not for the public debate. However, that is something that our clerk can certainly take back as a suggestion to look into how people can comment on those types of presentations and reports. But that I stand by that procedure in terms of delegating on multiple items that are staff-brought reports or motions. You're allowed to do that, and I know that you have actually done it before via Zoom.
I think my rate was 3 times in one night on issues, but that's just random because issues sometimes just pile up on the same night, and then you go 6 months without something.
Yes.
And,
so I did want to provide clarity on that one.
Oh, good, thank
as
you.
well as also on green development standards. I know that you've worked with Director Okrafka, and that we have had, and I know I've attended the Zoom meetings on green standards, and so we do appreciate your work on that as well. And you're very engaged in the township, which is fantastic. But I did just want to set the record straight on a few of those things and clarify those sitting around the table that right now, if you're somebody who wants to delegate and it's following our current procedural bylaw, that is what our staff go by, and we did do community engagement on our last update.
I agree with that, and even in my conversations back and forth with Candace today when I emailed on one another, I realized, or her response back is that you can't delegate to item number 9 because that's a presentation, but you can delegate on bylaws and staff reports and these things and that's things. Just realize how unusual that is in the province. Yes, that was in perfect conformity with the bylaws, and I will admit that Wilmot is very consistent and strict with being in conformity with the bylaws, but that it is also hard to understand because where in other municipalities, if it appears on the agenda, citizens can speak to it. Meaning if township is spending taxpayers' dollars and times discussing it, citizens should be able to come in and speak to it, and it's hard for citizens to understand here how we can speak to items number 8, 9, and 13, but not 14, 17, and 16 or something. So.
Yep. And like I said, I appreciate that, and I know staff have taken that
something
back.
To work on. Exactly.
We always need something to be able to improve on.
Exactly.
Councillors, are there any questions at this time for our delegate? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I would remind the delegation not to keep bringing up the sins of previous councils and rubbing it in our face. I think I would encourage you to speak to the current issues and the current issues only. I've heard these points multiple times in my short period on council, and I would hope you could look to the future rather than the past.
I guess, and I tried to put it all in context. No one's more optimistic about the future than me, but I was also denied the ability, the Wilmot Community Group was denied the ability to delegate here. And trust me, if you saw how heated the emails were back and forth this afternoon by some very discouraged citizens who have worked for 2 years on greenhouse gas emissions, specifically with Wilmot, and the fact that they were told that we could not have a representative delegate here tonight did not go over well in the community. So I appreciate it's just staff doing their job, but there are patterns.
And I would suggest for a solution going forward, your group is more than welcome to reach out to me, as I do have the authority under procedural bylaw to invite you for a presentation. So.
Perfect. Good, well, thank you.
But any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for joining us, Kevin.
Thank you.
And we will move along to our next delegate, and that is Stuart Snyder. And Stuart, thank you for joining us again in person tonight, and you will also have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Following those last two guys, I've only got 1 page, and they stole all my lines on me. So anyways, we'll go through it a repetition. As an excellent motion, however, the township has to come up with accountability and transparency. We moved here in '76, choosing between Woolwich, North Dumfries, and where we are here today, what we call a thriving agriculture-based community called Wilmot Township. Yes, I said Wilmot Township. From then until now, something has changed. I'm not sure what. Too many people refer it to as Will Not Township. I prefer not to live in Will Not Township. I chose Wilmot. This motion can be seen as the beginning of a changed era, allowing us to return to the true Wilmot with time, which many of us have lived in the past, we're living in the present, and we prefer to live here in the future. We as constituents must have the ability to be heard when it comes to what we feel are major issues. It will give us the opportunity to communicate with all of you at once rather than trying to communicate one-on-one. It will bring transparency back to the forefront. With this, we can all work together to remove that stigma of Will Not Township. One last comment that I would say, if I may please direct it to Councillor Martin. My public apology for my actions at the last council meeting while you were acting mayor. I was wrong. You were following the rules. But if you would only know the frustrations we have when we cannot be heard on some life-changing major issues. I trust this motion will allow more dialogue between everyone on both sides of the line fence in aiding to return to the Township of Wilmot, which I was proud to move to, and I'm still proud to live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Stuart. Any questions, councillors? Okay. Oh, sorry, Lillian, was that fixing your hair or was that a question? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't have a question to Mr. Snyder.
Okay. Very good. No. All right. Thank you again, Stuart, and to all of our delegates this evening. So, councillors, that brings us to the point of if anybody has any questions or comments on the motion, we'll go to Councillor Dunstall first.
No hair fixing right now. I would also like to push out the reporting date on this further down the line so that I don't think I need to repeat the reasons why, but I do think that the report should be pushed out to September.
So are you putting forward an amendment then for the timeline?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Martin. Any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Councillor Dunstall regarding the amendment, based on my perception of what I'm reading here, this would be a report likely coming back from legislative services. I mean, based on the previous comments that Councillor Sadhu had already discussed timelines for reporting back, I would sort of look at what the suggested workload or the workload that you're suggesting is ahead of our staff right now. this will likely just fall within legislative services, and I'm not sure what the relationship would have to the other pieces that we're discussing. Is it reasonable to think that we can just get this report back so that we can push forward with looking at procedural bylaw reforms and amendments?
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I guess I'm going to ask Clerk Bunn if this type of report would require your working with the directors to get the information. I would imagine that having people delegate on items that are not on the agenda would perhaps put our senior leadership team at a disadvantage, not being able to respond. That may not be the case. I'm just putting it out there, asking you, would there be a lot of working with the directors to get this report generated?
So I have been asked by the clerk to actually move that question over to Director Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. Clerk Bunn and myself did meet with Councillor Sadhu and discuss this motion last week, I guess it was. And one of the things that we addressed during that conversation was that while we could report back at the end of July, that may be a limited report. So similar to the conversation around the agriculture one, it may be an outline of best practices in other municipalities, potential move forward options, and the outline of what the work would be involved to actually get this process in place. So I want to be clear that if we do bring something back in July, at the end of July, it may not be the implementation of a process that leads to engagement starting, with the next council meeting. It may simply be a framework of how we would go about outlining that. And to your comment about senior leadership needing to be engaged, definitely, while Clerk Bunn understands the rules and guidelines of our existing bylaws, as well as the Municipal Act and how it impacts our rules of engagement, this has a significant impact on the workload of the entire organization. And so it would need to be looked at internally to determine how we can help manage this process. We want to make sure that the people who come and delegate and bring their issues to council are heard, and that we are able to respond and provide good guidance and good advice back to council on those issues. We don't want to be sitting here like deer in a headlight, not being aware, not being able to respond. So there's going to need to be a lot of thought put into this to ensure that it becomes the method of engagement that people are seeking, and not simply a forum for people to stand, speak to council, and then nothing happens. We want to make sure that this actually leads to public engagement, it improves that engagement, and it improves the outcomes that people are looking for. So we have committed and we put in that date knowing that we could provide something. It's not going to be a final solution. So I do want to be clear on that. As the motion says, we're going to report back on municipal best practices and some recommended potential changes to procedural bylaw as it relates to that. How that gets implemented is another story, and that would be outlined in the report as well.
Okay, Councillor Martin and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I hear Councillor Sadhu and Councillor Wilkinson saying that it should be a relatively simple process to report back, and there should be no problem reporting back by July 29th. I'm also aware that we have a strategic plan process in the works. I'm hoping we can meet together soon to talk about what our strategic plans. I heard the one delegate, Mr. Thomason, say how difficult it is to come here, and when he previously said that in a previous meeting, I asked him about it and found out that he had called on a Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock and got on our agenda by Monday evening. And so it seems relatively easy. I realize Mr. Thomason has said there's other things that they wanted to speak about. Personally, I think there can be a lot of benefit in having people come and talk about all kinds of issues, but I also realize that the township has had these bylaws in place for many years, and so I'm curious, what are the reasons that the bylaws have been in place? And so I think understanding that history, understanding the process, I know that I personally have tried to get on a council agenda a different location at 3 o'clock on the same day of the meeting, and I couldn't get on. And so it seems to me that as a township, we have a relatively easy process, based on hearing that Mr. Thomason could get here by calling on at 3 o'clock on the day of the meeting. So it just seems to me that there are a number of issues that would be important for us not to avoid and not to consider. I do believe that this change could have an impact on our other directors and on our staff. I think we should talk about it in principle. I really think we need to listen to all of our citizens, all of the people who live in Wilmot Township. And I've said that myself, that I'm happy for people to call me. If anybody calls me, I'm quite willing to meet with them and discuss any issue. So I just think that there's some complications here. It's important for us to consider.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I appreciate everyone's concerns and points regarding getting back a robust report, but I'm looking at the spirit of this, thinking it's getting a basic direction back on the 29th. I mean, it's 7 weeks. This motion, at least my perception, is that it's intended to improve communication and transparency, and I can't think of any other time that'd be more important than right now. With everything that's going on in the township, my concern would be we kick this further down the road in September, depending on what the report reads, then we're probably looking at bringing back something again even later. So it's conceivable that we could be into the new year before something meaningful actually happens. I think if we're looking for a basic framework on July 29th, it's not unreasonable to ask for. This is democracy, right? We represent the people. They can call us, they can email us, sure. However, sometimes we need to hear from citizens in this forum. This is the place for these things to happen. This is the place for other citizens to hear of other ideas. If I get a phone call, it doesn't mean I'm passing that information on to everybody else. It is vital to the way that we function and the way that we form policy to hear from folks regularly and in this forum. So I think when I look at it, I see it as very simple. Getting a report together by July 29th to me does not seem unreasonable. We're talking about giving people an opportunity to come here and address us and bring their concerns forward. And some of those concerns may be shared by other citizens. So I'm totally against pushing this down the road at this point. I think we need to act on this now.
Councillor Sudi.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilkinson. Also, I just wanted to say, so us as council, we have our feet on the ground. I'm hearing from residents every day. I would say this is urgent. The community is desperate for further engagement, and this should be our priority. We as council set priority, and judging by all the conversations I'm having, this is something that we need further transparency, and we need the ability to hear from our residents more. Emails are great, phone calls are great. I answer every phone call I get. But like a previous delegate already said, that the truest form is standing on that podium in front of the horseshoe and talking to us councillors. So I humbly request that we keep the original timeline and let's get moving.
Councillor Dunstall and then Councillor Cressman.
Thank you. I want to make sure that I make myself very, very clear here. I understand how important it is for our constituents to be able to speak to us. That's never been an issue for me or for, I believe, anyone on that council. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about giving staff the opportunity to prepare something that will actually be something that we can implement and that will work well. We all are able to, there are many people who won't stand in front of that podium, but that will send us emails. They can send emails that get onto correspondence, and each and every one of us can pull those and have a conversation about those. We also have the opportunity to bring forward things when we speak to many of our constituents about their concerns. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I really do not disagree. I just think that we have a lot on our plates, and we want to make sure that this gets done and gets done correctly. That's my concern.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I think what I hear from my old days through you, Mayor, of being a chair at other boards, et cetera, is we agree in principle with this. The timing is of issue, and the question is, are the mover and seconder agreeable that a framework is adequate, or are they looking for something that would be implemented on July 29th?
So, I mean, at this time, just procedurally, we do have the amendment before us to move the date. So I do definitely hear what you're saying, Councillor Crescent. I'm just also trying to dispose of the amendment that we have before us, and I think that we've all kind of amply debated and people have shared their points. So with that, I think I'd rather just make my comment and then call the vote on the amendment, and I guess that will show if our mover and seconder are in favor of that or not. With that, I do just want to make my comments. I personally see this one as different in terms of the time and workload to the motion that was before, and I say that coming from a council where we do already allow delegations for people not on the agenda at the region. Our procedural bylaw allows up to 20 minutes of any meeting. So that would, our delegations are 5 minutes each. So that would be up to 4 people to come delegate to regional council on an item that's not on the agenda. It's 2 sentences in our procedural bylaw, one that gives the clerk the authority to move that person to another agenda date, which I think deals with what Director Clark was referencing, that they want to have answers potentially for council depending on what the issues are. So, I mean, that's a nice safeguard in terms of we don't have someone coming with a problem that we're going to then turn around and ask staff and they might not have an answer right there. That gives the flexibility there. And then, like I said, the other part is that there's up to 20 minutes of delegates to come forward on items that are not on the agenda. And I will be honest, we have had people come and talk to us about other governments and other countries. Was one of our delegations to which, because it really did not fall in our jurisdiction, we listened, heard their concerns. The other thing I would say too, just again, this is anecdotal, but my experience on regional council with this policy in place, I don't think I've seen a topic come up that I haven't gotten an email or some form of correspondence that I've already had to go to staff and ask for information or their input. So in terms of workload, I have yet to see an event where we have something come forward that isn't already going to staff through another form of communications being addressed. But I do know that it grants people a nice opportunity to be able to come to council when we don't have something on an agenda. So I personally see this as more of a procedural legislative point, and because of that, as well as there are many examples, including municipalities surrounding us that do already have this in their procedural bylaw, I personally won't be in favor of the amendment to push the date. But again, I will leave that vote to others. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents since everybody else had a say on this one. So I will call the vote on the amendment. And the amendment is that we push back to September, is that correct? Yes, the amendment is that the reporting date is pushed back to September. So all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? And that is defeated. So now we have the motion before us as it stands as printed. Any final comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. I do have a motion that I would like to ask for a waiving of notice. So I would have to turn it over to Councillor Sadhu. You are chair when I'm not able to chair. And then if you want to flip it back to me, I can explain what I wanted to do.
Well, this feels nice being the chair. To former Mayor Salonen for your motion.
I'd like to point out when I'm not chairing, I don't think I actually become the former, but that's
Former
okay.
chair.
I'll let that slide. My motion that I was wanting to bring forward is up on the screen. I know it's a bit hard to read, so I will just give context. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario is seeking nominations for their board of directors, and it's a position that I'm interested in running for to represent Rural Caucus. This is all across Ontario, and I think it would be a great opportunity for advocacy. AMO, I think many of us are going to the conference in August up in Ottawa, as well as it's a great opportunity. They have a memorandum of understanding with the province, so to really build a rapport at the provincial level. There's work that I know we're doing in our council chambers that can be related to many other municipalities and vice versa, and I think it's a great potential opportunity. However, in order for me to put forward a nomination for myself, legislatively, AMO does require that I have support of my council through a motion. The reason I needed to, or will be asking for you to waive notice of motion, is the deadline is before our next meeting for nominations, including all paperwork, including a motion from council to be passed. So I would ask for a 2/3 vote. If you think this is an opportunity that should be something you would want to support me pursuing, and then we would have to vote on the motion should we get 2/3 to waive notice. So I guess that's back to Chair Sadhu.
I am the chair, so do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Cressman. Oh, yeah. Moved by Mayor Salonen and seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any discussions, anything? Nope. Oh. This is just on the yep. Okay, can I have a vote? All those in favor? And yep, and that passes unanimously.
So I think I've already explained the motion. I will just leave that to if there's a seconder.
Yep, seconder, Councillor Wilkinson, and any comments? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the acting chair, I'm happy to hear back that there's an opportunity here for us to potentially build a stronger relationship with AMO and other municipalities. So this could only be perceived as a positive, in my opinion, and I'm hoping that we can push this through and wish you well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Acting Mayor, no political speech to convince us of your...
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to hold the vote. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously.
Great. I will take back the chair duties. Thank you very much, Councillor Sadhu, for doing that, and thank you very much, Council, for supporting my nomination. I look forward to giving you the political speech at AMO, where you can then actually vote for Rural Caucus. With that, we will jump into announcements, and I'm so excited to see that there's still quite a few people here, because I do have a few announcements to go through. I know at our last meeting, I had quite the list of months that June is designated as, and I have since found out that I missed two. One is that June is Italian Heritage Month in Ontario, and I in fact am 1/4 Italian heritage, so I just wanted to make note that since 2010 the province of Ontario has recognized June as Italian Heritage Month, and that we actually have a lot of local Italian owned businesses throughout the region and Wilmot, so I would encourage you to definitely check those out. June is also known as Bike Month in Ontario, so I thought it was a great time to point out the wonderful hydro cut that we have, which is apparently some of the best biking in southwestern Ontario for trail riding. But I do also want to take the chance as a friendly reminder about parking when you use the hydro cut. If you could please use the designated parking lots. There is one down the pathway off Snyder's Road in Wilmot, as well as there's a parking lot off of Glasgow, and overflow can go into the Ira Needles parking lot complex. Just really wanted to note, I've heard from residents that there's been parking along Snyder's, and it's really inhibiting some of our farmers from being able to get in and out of their laneways with their oversized equipment. So it is wonderful that it is Bike Month, and the hydro cut is a great resource. If we can just all coexist and share the road, that would be great. On Sunday, June 2nd, I also just wanted to give a shout out to the New Hamburg Legion. and many of the Wilmot community members for coming to Decoration Day at Riverside Ceremony, and thank you for the Legion for reinstating that great event. And it actually, I did learn that it predated both World Wars, Decoration Day, so it is known as our forgotten First Remembrance Day, and next year you will have the opportunity to join as the Legion hopes to continue to make this an annual event. I also wanted to note that on June 6th was the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we did actually have the poppy flag raised up at the up at the township here to honor that, as well as I'm sure if any of you saw any news that day, you probably saw many of the events happening from coast to coast, as well as in Normandy and other places. So I just wanted to make note of that. Also a reminder that Wilmot residents that the summer program registration is now open. Tomorrow, June 11th at 9 a.m., registration for non-residents will open, and you can visit wilmot.ca/recweb to register. Cruising by the Pond is also restarting. It was supposed to kick off last Wednesday, but due to poor weather, the kickoff is officially happening this Wednesday, June the 12th at 5 p.m. at the Baden Pond. I hope to see folks out there. It's always a great event that happens weekly throughout the summer. There's also open gym drop-ins that are beginning this weekend as part of the township's efforts to celebrate Parks and Recreation Month. The township is offering a drop-in open gym program on Fridays and Saturdays at the rec complex. And the Wilmot Rec Complex is also running pickup ball hockey and inline hockey for various age groups, and more information on those offerings are available on the Township of Wilmot website. Thank you to our community services staff for putting together those initiatives. I still have more in case you were wondering. Last council meeting, we did hear that Castle Kilbride's team's annual update, and they have now launched a new initiative to make the museum more accessible by offering quiet hours at the castle. Special tours on select Tuesdays throughout the summer from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And you can visit the castlekilbride.ca website for more information. And a note that personal support workers are complimentary tickets for entry. Tickets are also still available for the Interfaith Counseling Center's 40th anniversary gala, which is happening on Wednesday, June 19th at Pettycomb's Banquet Hall. If you look up the Interfaith Counseling Center's website, you can get more details there on how to purchase your ticket. And June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and it's a day to celebrate the diverse cultures and histories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. It's a day for Indigenous peoples to celebrate their cultures and honor ancestry who experienced many forms of anti-Indigenous racism. An opportunity for settlers to take time to learn about the many ways that Indigenous people have been both historically discriminated against and the way that in present day we can work towards helping break down the barriers and work towards truth and reconciliation. And a reminder, lastly, that the Township of Wilmot is hosting a free Canada Day event on July 1st of this year at William Scott Park in New Hamburg. And the day will begin with a traditional Indigenous sunrise ceremony, and opening remarks will happen at 11 a.m. and there will be live musical performances, vendors, fun throughout the day, including if you really want to see me fall into a dunk tank, I will be there on the platform for the dunk tank. And just a big thanks again to the Canada Day Event Task Force and additional community volunteers for all of your work. Councillors, is there anything I missed / items you'd like to mention? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I also want to mention that there's a councillor sitting on that dais right now who will also be getting dunked. And unfortunately, I probably will not be there. But if somebody could please send me pictures of Councillor Martin getting dunked, I would be willing to pay for that.
Very good. I'm glad to see I'll be in good company, Councillor Martin. And Councillor Wilkinson just said that he will be on the dunk tank. So, I mean, that's just leaving only half of council left and a few more weeks to get you guys on there. But I won't wait around for answers tonight. Any other questions or comments on items tonight? All right. Then our confirmatory bylaw. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And lastly, adjournment. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for coming out.